Okay, in this video, I'm going to be talking about and showing you the way I installed this pre-cut sauna kit that I got over the internet from Cedar. Here's a list of all the stuff that I'm going to be going over, roughly. And it might not be done the right way, the perfect way, the way you do it, etc., etc. It's just the way I did it. So hopefully it can be helpful. But first, let's see where I'm starting from on this video. I have a heated living area type basement, and on the other side of the wall, I've got a crawl space. And so I framed up an area in there. I didn't have much room, but I framed up a 4x4 area, and this will become the sauna that's in this little diagram. So I decided to frame up the door as well, even though I didn't have the kit, and I didn't know about exactly how to do that, but I got it all framed up, insulated, and I was just waiting for the kit. It took about 5 weeks to come, and it came in this huge crate, delivered and placed into my garage. And so I'm going to uncrate this and show you what's inside in the first segment of this video. So the first problem was kind of getting into the crate. And I'm telling you, there were a lot of nails to pull. But I removed the nails from all the boards and ended up probably saving some of that wood, because I think I can make shelves and stuff out of it. Anyway, we'll pull the cardboard off here and see what we got. It was all packaged really nicely. So it's basically the lumber kind of wrapped and identified as to what it's used for. They do have some instructions here. We're going to flip through those shortly. There's some pre-built stuff in there. There's the door in the middle, of course, and the benches. And then lots of tongue and groove to cover the walls. And there's some sauna rocks there. And there's a light and a bucket and a ladle. And so here's the instructions. I'll flip through these real quick. A diagram, the hinge, and then kind of how to do the venting and insulation, and pretty light on detail. This is all the hardware they gave you for the door handle and loading up the hinge, the spring hinge. They give you this light that goes on the wall. Pretty straightforward. Ladle and the bucket and the handle to go on the door. And then this thing to lean on, I don't know what you call it. The benches, pre-built benches, and the bench supports. And this vapor barrier, which is 54 inches. So in a 48 inch room, it's made it for very few seams. They also gave you these vents. They gave you 2 sets. I only use 1 set because my inbound vent is under the door. And then there's the sauna rocks, and of course the pre-hung door that I just need to place in the rough opening. And they cut it about the right size, kinda. We'll see what the problem is later. 5 1/8 inch jamb, which presumed drywall on both sides, which wasn't the case. I told them that, but that's the way it came. And a whole bunch of tongue and groove. So I moved this down to where the project is. And we're going to continue on here, looking at the, I forget what's next. Oh yeah, I decided to, these are 3.5 inch face, and so I decided to rip the first row because I thought the top row would be very narrow otherwise. Probably would have worked out because there's a nice border they give you, a nice trim piece they give you for the top. But as it turned out, I ripped the first one. So now we'll look at cutting this, and I'm cutting through the baseboards here with this tool. Sorry for the jiggly video, but I cut through the baseboards there, and then I took my drywall saw just manually. I have a reciprocating saw that I could have used, but I figured that I'd just do this. It's pretty easy to cut through the drywall with this. And I hadn't opened this up to the heated living area so that I didn't introduce air from the crawl space into the house. Not that the crawl space is all that moist or anything like that, but I figured I'd wait until I had the vapor barrier up, or was about to put up the vapor barrier, which is a step after this. So, yeah, this is the it's going to happen step. There's no turning back now. Boom. And so now we're opened up and we're ready to put the vapor barrier up. So I got one big U-shaped piece that goes on two walls in the ceiling. So I didn't have very many joints there. And then I added to the one wall and taped around the things. This is the vent, which I'm going to show you back up a little bit and show you the plan for the vent. I put it under the top bench because that's what the heater manufacturer suggested, and venting out into the room. And I couldn't do it on the heater wall because there's not enough room. So I got this, and I made this out of foam and just taped it together with the foil tape. And I just picked a height that was under the top bench. And we'll see, if you stay tuned to the very end of this video, you'll see the last thing I install is the grate over this vent. And it's amazing how well it worked out. So we start by installing the cedar on the ceiling. And like I said, I had to cut these boards down from 5 feet down to 4. All of them were exactly 5, so the only ones that would have fit would have been, without cutting, would have been the very first, basically the ceiling and the very first wall. And the rest of them have the other wall to contend with, so they'd be a little bit shorter. And my framing wasn't perfect, but it was pretty darn close to 4 feet. Here's finishing up the ceiling, and you gotta rip the last board. So the instructions, or the video on Cedarbrook said to cut it about a 1/4 inch less than the measurement. And there's a trim strip that goes around there. You got to have a table saw to do this job. You absolutely can't not do the job without a table saw. My white balance is all messed up here, but getting the last board in place, you can face nail it because because the trim piece will go. Actually, the other wall will even cover that. So you just face nail this last row. I usually try to cut out these long scenes to respect your time. By the way, I got these stainless steel nails. They're 2 inches. They're plenty long. They're really too long. They worked fine, except they were just longer than I needed, I think. So I put a row along all the walls to start with, and made them level. And then I built up completely the back wall first. This is the recommendation from Cedarbrook. They say do the one wall at a time. So here I'm obviously running it fast motion, just leveling up not leveling up each board, but basically putting a couple of rows up and then taking the level and making sure that it's about right. And the other walls, when I put them up, it's more about making the line even with the other wall. But since there's the corner trim, it would be difficult to see even a 1/4 inch, or you could probably see a 1/2 inch, but I was down to the fraction of an inch trying to make it right. It's like, I realized it's probably way more detailed than it's worth. When you put up the corner trim, you can't see. But yeah, just nailing right in the groove. I never did get a picture of that because I had both hands full. So here's the top piece, which is about a 2 and something. And I've got it 2 inches here, it looks like. Tilting the blade so that it goes in easier. That's another trick that they have on the Cedarbrook site. And the Cedarbrook videos aren't really very extensive. They're pretty minimal. But there's other sites that have some good tips. So you could probably go there and get some good information on the specifics of see what it fits in the training. Again, I'm not sure why this is in here. I usually wouldn't show the whole cut. I would just show the beginning and the end. And I think my saw has it. Never mind. Anyway, got that in there. And you can face nail that one too, because there's going to be a trim piece along that joins the wall and the ceiling. So there it is, finished my first wall. And there's a piece of framing behind there, so you can nail anywhere along there. Sometimes it's kind of hard to get that nailer in to the spot you want it. It's difficult to get it up close. It also tends to kind of mar the surface. So I was going to cut around for this box for the light. And what I've done in the past in situations like this is take a grease pencil and sort of get it color the edges of the box, and then you put the piece that you need to cut. I've done this with both drywall and paneling. You put the piece up there where it's going to go, and then you smash it up against the box, and then what you end up with is a little imprint of where the box actually is, so you don't have to guess. And then I just took the jigsaw, cut it out. For the next piece, I just measured it. I think I took dimensions off the height of the box and lined them up, drew the line rather than trying to do the scribe technique that I showed you earlier there. Yeah, just the overall height of the box. Not pretty close to the edge there, but the piece didn't break on me. Cedar is really soft wood. It's really lovely to work with. I really enjoyed playing with the saws and keep all my fingers and everything, which I did manage to do. So we got the box, pieces for the box cut out. Didn't have to go back to the saw. which is always nice. Putting that nail right in that tongue at a 45-degree angle. And now we get the last piece in, or the second to the last piece in. Now, according to Cedarbrook, you're not supposed to nail that because it makes it harder to get that last piece in there. So here's the last piece going in up against the ceiling. Get it worked down in there so you can get the tongue and groove to connect properly. Then got my little pry bar, my little cat's paw pry bar thing that I usually use to get that tight. And again, face nail, since it's going to be covered by the trim. And so here's the other wall, and again, doing the same kind of a thing, cutting along the opening for the vent. And so the rest of the walls similar, and finishing up all the planking. And that's the way that it's going to go. So after the kit was delivered earlier, I got the heater and accessories. Came with another set of Sauna rocks, which I didn't need. Came with a control, and then here's the inside. That's what was in the box with the controller. And then, of course, it came with the heater. And this is the kind of bottom area. Comes with brackets that are offset, so it sits out from the wall a ways. And there's a over limit connection. I think that's what that is. And here's the plate. And inside the heater box, there was some signs for the wall and some instructions. And I thought I'd just flip through the instructions real quick here. Not that you'll be able to read it, but just give you an idea about what might be in there based on the pictures and whatever. And this is the box for the control. And the connections, they label them pretty good, and the instructions tell you what to connect to where. There's also a connection that you undo there for the sensor. And this is I highlighted the one that was heater that was mine, because the instructions are slightly confusing because they're for a bunch of different heaters, so you have to figure out which one's yours. So I got the power for the light in the sauna, and I also got a bunch of wires for the controlling of the heater, because there's like a timer thing. I got the timer thing. And here's the wires all connected. And it's pretty straightforward and quick to get the light working. And then on the bottom of the heater, there's some knockouts. And I had to figure out, here's the connections that they give you. They get some jumpers. I took a couple of those off, just went connected directly. But first of all, I wanted to figure out where to drill the holes in that particular tongue and groove wood, so that it would line up with the knockouts in the bottom of the heater. And it wasn't quite 3/4. It was a little bit bigger than 3/4, so I had to take a Dremel and make it a little bigger. And they also recommended drilling a hole in the bottom of your conduit so that if any water got in there, it would drip out. So I did that. And so here's the wires fed through the board and then the conduit. So I'm ready to stick these up into the bottom of the heater and then make the connections. So if you're not intimidated yet, there's all the wires sticking out there ready to kind of connect, trying to figure out where everything goes. Wasn't too bad, except for that this block, this termination block, was so far back in there, it was very difficult to get the wires up there and get them in the right places. So I took the termination block off and pulled it forward and actually got the wires connected, and then I put the termination block back where it belonged. So then I got the heater in there, okay, and got the conduits connected and everything. Got the rocks in there. So the heater's all done now. Did a quick test, just turned it on and just made sure nothing blew up, which it didn't. Just a little bit of heat came out. I turned it off right away. No need to. If it heats, it heats. So next step is to install the benches that they give you. Now they're pre-made. They're all, before the benches go in there, they recommend silicone caulk between the floor and the bottom row of plank. So I did that. But yeah, they pre-make a bench for you that's 47 inches, and if you frame to 48, it sounds like it would work because it's a 47 plus a half inch of plank on each side. But there's kind of a problem here in that you have to tilt it into place. What I was showing here is that I put the vent underneath the top bench as recommended by the heater instructions. Now, if you look at on the Sauna, the Cedarbrook site, they say, they generalize and say maybe put it diagonal high, but I followed the heater instructions. So anyway, these are the supports they give you for the bench, and I used galvanized deck screws to put them in there, and I pre-drilled, which is not necessary. I think on the Cedarbrook installation video, they just show you drilling straight through the cedar, which is really soft wood, so I don't think I would have needed a pre-drill, but just to be thorough, I pre-drilled. And these screws aren't really holding much because these supports are sitting directly on the floor, and the force is going directly down, so there's really not that much in the way of, you don't have to put a whole bunch of screws in here. This is basically just keeping it in place. So get the top support in on both sides, and then put the 47-inch bench in a 47-inch space. And I measured mine, and it was 47, or maybe 46 and 15/16. It was just right there at 47. And so, but this shows what I'm trying to show in this diagram or in this SketchUp model, is that if you're taking the bench in through the door, it's going to be vertical, and then you're going to have to come and set it down on the supports, and there's no way to do that unless you exceed 47 inches. So I had to put this thing on the table saw and sort of hack. So there's shows the interference pattern there, but I had to put this on the table saw and just kind of hack off on part of it in order to get it to lay down on the support. And when I first put it in here, I didn't want to just jam down on it and scrape up the cedar planks on the sides that was adjacent to the bench. So it was up a little bit, and I thought, I don't want to push down on that and scratch it up. But I leaned on the wall, and it was just enough for it to drop flat without scraping up the wood. So that actually worked out okay, but a lot of extra work trying to hack that thing on the table saw. It was not easy because my blade on the table saw wasn't high enough. So I drilled up from the bottom here. And got some more galvanized screws in there. And then installing the bottom bench, they're labeled. You kind of know where they go. In this tiny little sauna, there's really not many choices for where these things could go, especially well labeled like that. So I got to credit them. They did a pretty good job in designing this part, because if they had not designed it where the bottom bench was underneath the top bench, it never would have fit. You never would have been able to get it in there. Well, with the way they designed the widths of the benches and everything, and the heater, because you see it's right up against the heater, and on the other side it's right up against the top support. So the only way to get that in there is just exactly like this. So it's just like a puzzle. It just kind of worked. And this one, I must have cut just slightly more off on the table saw because it dropped down without me having to lean on the wall. But then you slide it right back into place, and And there's where it ended up. So the benches are installed. All right, so next step is to put up some trim. And they give you these 1x2 trim pieces. Pretty straightforward to measure and cut. And I got really lucky on this one. The light was just barely far enough down for me to get a trim piece up there. Lucky. I did not plan that. This is the trim piece that's going above the door. They're all pretty close to 47 here. Here's the vertical piece. Just barely big enough. So it was much more interesting to install the door. By interesting, I mean pain in the neck. So we'll find out lots of interesting things about how the door was. But first, we'll talk about this kind of bracket instead of shims method to install a pre-hung door. Basically, what you do is you have these 4 brackets, and you get 3 screws per bracket. So you get, 6 brackets. And so it's pretty straightforward to get those on there. You just put them in the specific spot. And you take this out, and the whole thing racks on you. That shipping screw. But then you draw a line. This is kind of the new way, if you will, to install a pre-hung door. You draw a plumb line about a 1/2 inch in from the rough framing. And then you use the brackets to line up to that line, and you end up with a plumb hinge side. But unfortunately, my rough in framing was just a little bit shy, and because the brackets were on there, I couldn't put it inside and take it out. But the problem is the carpet. So I just tried working with trying to saw it, and I managed to get it in there. Just sort of trimmed off just a fraction. With the rasp actually is what ended up working. So here's putting in the first screw of the pre-hung door installing kit, and lining that those notches on the brackets with that is supposed to make a plumb jamb. And it seemed to go pretty good, and this just didn't require much effort on my part. Unfortunately, I realized that something was binding down here at the bottom of the door. I didn't know exactly where. It turns out it was that bracket itself that was banging. And now I'm noticing, the door's not going to open, because when I ordered this door, I told them it was drywall on the outside, nothing on the inside, and the other room was carpet. They asked me all these questions. I answered them, but apparently didn't somehow work out. So now I'm having to trim off the bottom of the door. So I needed to trim off about a 1/2 inch off the bottom of the door. So I didn't know exactly how much I was trimming off. I just laid my ruler down on the carpet. And then I decided it would be much easier to trim off the bottom of the door than it would be to do anything else. So I just took the screws out of the hinges and took the door out there and took a look at the bottom of it, which we'll look at in a minute. So unfortunately, what I see is a bunch of fasteners. So, a bunch of nails. So I thought, well, I could either just take an old saw blade and just bore through them, burn through the bottom of the wood, or I could try to be a little bit more nuanced than that. So I did. I tried to actually cut the nails out with this. And I angled it in just a little bit so that if I came by with the saw blade at that same level, maybe I wouldn't hit the nails. But I decided it wasn't I wasn't sure enough to use a good saw blade on it. So I figured I'd just stick an old saw blade on my circular saw. And so there's the result. And of course I hit nails everywhere. Luckily it was an old blade that had run through nails before. But I got the door shortened, and with a little bit of sanding, it wasn't too much worse for the wear. But yeah, I mean, the carpet, I don't think the carpet was any, all that much thicker than normal carpet. I thought it was just normal carpet, but apparently it was either not, the door wasn't built to withstand the carpet, or my carpet was thicker. So I double checked my plumb line, which was good, and I got it to the point where it would clear the carpet. So that was good. But the jamb wasn't quite right yet. There was still a problem, and basically that bracket was hitting the rough-in framing. So I just took a blade knife, and kind of cut that off. Once I got that off, the spacing in between the door and the jamb was uniform down the vertical jamb. So that worked out after I got that bracket interference problem solved. So now I'm taking off the molding so that I can put the trim on the door. The door trim comes down, of course. So I have to get that off. It wasn't even nailed in that well. I got both sides taken off. And then I got the trim installed, which I didn't have a lot of footage of, just normal installation of the trim. And so the doors works nicely. Wasn't easy as it could have been. But here's the second problem with the door. They sent a 5 1/8 inch jamb instead of whatever a half an inch less is of that, which would have been right, because I have only the planks on the inside, no drywall first. So now I've got this problem. So I figured I'd do some caulking and reduce any air flow between the jamb and the rough framing. There was a kind of a wide spot down here. So I cut a piece of foam and stuck it in there with some caulk on it. But I got that, I got the door all caulked between the jamb and the framing. And then I worked on the trim. And they give you this trim that's 1x3 nominal. It's 2.5 inches. And I figured because I got that 5 1/8 inch jamb, I'd have to have a spacer in there. I found some nails where I could nail from the back. So I thought that might be a pretty good approach. And on this side, it worked out perfectly. So my plan worked out great. I framed it just right. But on this side, it's too close to the heater. I just wasn't going to do that. So I figured that I could just make a kind of a narrow door trim. And so I ripped this board down, and then I just happened to have this this planer. My father-in-law gave this to me, and I never used it before. It was the very first time I ever used the thing. But it did a really nice job. Made a nice, very nice surface there. Both surfaces were going to show, so I figured I'd try to make it as nice as I could, instead of just having a ripped thing. So then I just joined some 1x1, I guess they call it, trim on the back of that ripped down door framing, door trim. And so I think it's going to look okay. Narrow door trim. I just need to mark it for the, I'm going to cut it at a 45. Could have gone flat across the top or do a 45, but I figured I'd do a 45. But I didn't quite thin enough. So I'll run this thing through. Cut it at a 45. Looks like it's going to work with my reveals. Put the 2-inch nails back in. And go in at an angle here so it doesn't pop out the front, which I was mostly successful at. There was one that kind of showed just a teeny bit. That's how we ended up. It's pretty far away from the heater and goes up to this 45 joint, which I got to match pretty good. I'm not a finished carpenter by a long shot. And then I used the regular width trim on that side. I don't know, it doesn't look perfect, but it is what it is. Then it was time to lay out the duck board. They give you the duck board and you just figure out how you want it to go in there. I was going to do a complete rectangle, which is what they recommended in the videos, but I made it a little bit different. Used nails, I used some big framing nails for spacers and cut it about the size where it goes under the bench just a little bit, comes out the door just a little bit. I might end up adding a spacer to the bottom of stuck to the bottom of the floor there if the space between the floor and the door is a little bit too large for air gap, but that's where that's where my fresh air is coming from. As I said earlier, I didn't use both vents. So now it's time to add the spring to this. I guess they call it a bomber hinge. I've never heard of that before, but you basically just use this Allen wrench to charge this spring up. And they give you 2 of these little pins. And there seems to be no science associated with it. I think it's just like as soon as it closes as fast as you think it ought to close, then you're done. And there's air pressure inside, so it closes really slowly. But yeah, I put a few turns on that. I didn't care if it closed a little bit on the slower side. It's fine. So, door hinge done. Now put the handle on. They do supply those screws, so you don't have to worry about that. Although I'm sure the galvanized deck screws that you had to use to put in the benches would have worked for this too. There we go. Door's done. And finally, I'll put on this vent cover, and I was so lucky. This worked out absolutely fitting perfectly under the bench, and it was lucky because, I mean, look at that. I couldn't have planned it better than that. And I didn't. I didn't plan that. I just guessed at the height, and it worked out perfectly. So just that's my last bit of nailing, I think, on the sauna, and I'm done. So let's turn it on. The light comes on. And when you go in and hold your hand over it, it takes a while to heat up, but you could barely feel it. I could hear it, but I couldn't even feel any heat coming out of it. And this temperature hygrometer thing came as a gift from my daughter. And nice sauna warming gift she bought me. So it wasn't included in the kit. But it's accurate. I've proved to myself. And here we are. Sauna's up to 150. It's not cranked to the max. It goes higher than that, obviously. But the sauna is working. Ooh, I can almost feel it. I've taken a couple saunas since I made this video. But the problem in this neck of the woods is that the cold water, in quotes, gets up to 85 degrees. It's not even the hottest part of summer yet. It's 75 already. Earlier in the year, I was measuring it. It was like 62, but I've got a solution for that. Press the chill button. Boom. I got a little water in the pipes to clear through, and I've got a little volume of water up there to chill down. But after a few seconds, this starts dropping, and the water coming out is in the, believe it or not, 44 degree range. And so somebody might wonder, well, how did he do that? Well, if you're one of those people that's making that inquiry, I haven't yet created the video for my chiller, but I will. And when I do, I will post it at the end of this video, so you can click into that if you're so interested. But yeah, this gets down to 44.6 degrees.